Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a podcast where interesting people come and tell about the stories they've crafted. As for myself, I'm an author. I've created novels, short stories, novellas, and even poetry. If you'd like to find out more about what I've done, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. Tonight, I am super excited to have my friend Eli Cranor on. Hi, Eli.
What's up, Eric? Good to
Hey,
see you, man.
I am representing for you tonight. Went to the only jersey I own. Hello, Peyton. So,
That's right, Broncos.
an homage to your career, your in your playing days, your coaching days. You're definitely football has been kind of an integral part, I think, probably of your life, and probably still is to some degree.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I played my first tackle football season when I was 9.
Wow.
And then played all the way through high school, college, one season overseas, then coached for 5 years.
Hmm.
And so my last season was when I was 29. So
Okay.
it was 20 straight years of football seasons. And yeah, I played at a school down in South Florida called Florida Atlantic in Boca Raton. I played at a small school, transferred back to Arkansas called Washita Baptist, and I played a year in Sweden in the European football leagues. And yeah, man, I think like everything, my first book, Don't Know Tough, was about high school football in
Mm.
Arkansas, or at least around like the kids, involved in it. And more than that, like football just kind of, I take that same like very disciplined approach that a coach or a
Mm.
quarterback might have like to my craft,
Yeah.
of running. So yeah, so football is a big deal. So appreciate the Peyton jersey.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I know in some of the other videos I've seen or some stuff online, it might maybe it's in the basement or whatever it is, but you've showed some images before of kind of like uh the madness behind the scenes of how you actually concoct
Well,
everything.
I'll break it. I'll break it here, man. This is breaking news. Is the old office is gone. So what it
Okay.
is our basement was completely unfinished.
Hmm.
Like I was literally living in a man cave down there. And so I had one room of it that had like plywood walls and concrete floors. And yeah, like if you look at older
Mm.
interviews or stuff, I just would staple stuff to the walls and had a dartboard.
Yeah.
Um, and so about a month ago, we decided to do like a full scale remodel of the basement.
Okay.
So it's beautiful in that like I'm really thinking I'm going to do some cool stuff with the new office,
Hmm.
which would include like a wall about the size of this one behind me with like bookshelves.
Okay.
But one of the panels of the bookshelf is going to be like a knives out like door, like
Yes.
into like a big like archive, like because I keep all my first drafts because I
Right.
write by hand. So I've
Yeah.
got like 3 filing cabinets filled up with stuff from about a decade now of like short stories and crap. and
Wow.
and and my wife's trying to get us to put like a speakeasy back there too, like a little like a hidden bar. So it's beautiful because we've got all these ideas. We have real construction people, contractors doing real work,
Yeah.
but it was really freaky
Yeah.
because I've done so much of my work like in that one place.
Hmm.
And not only that, I mean, just the whole vibe. Like it has my daughter's, like pictures from kindergarten and all the stuff that, so I literally like took it down like piece by
Like
piece,
people. Yeah.
and like put it in boxes so that like even when I have like real floors and real bookshelves, and I can maybe try and put things back where they go,
Hmm.
even if there's real walls. Because yeah, there's a part of me that's like, damn man, like you're gonna lose the magic of that place. So I don't know. Fingers crossed, but I'm excited about the new things.
Well, I've read 2 out of 3 books. I've not got the Broiler yet. I think what I'm going to do with Broiler though, I had it's back behind me actually. So Don't Know Tough. I
Yeah.
got the physical book, and then I learned after the fact. I think after I had bought that is when I actually had figured out that you do your own reading for your audiobooks. So when Ozark Dogs came out, I got a Audible account and actually got to hear you, which knowing you and interacting with you before, it gives that connection. So you actually you and Dave Grohl actually helped me get up to upstate New York for a wedding last fall.
Yes.
I listened to you first, and then I listened to Dave. It was like 13 hours. So you were like half the drive up. Dave was the other half, and then like the whole ride back because Dave just kept talking for a while. He was that was a long one.
Yeah.
But it was fun to connect. Can I just hear you tell your story, and you'll be doing the same thing with Broiler, which when this airs will be out tomorrow. Will be out July 2nd.
It will be out July 2nd, but I will not be reading the audiobook for
You're not
Broiler.
doing the audiobook.
Ah, man. So here was the deal.
Wait,
So
what? No,
yeah,
well, now I have to buy it. Okay,
I
fine.
don't know. So all my books are very Arkansas based.
Yes.
We have an MMA fighter from Arkansas named Bryce Mitchell, Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell, this little cagey white boy. And he had this great thing. He won welterweight, so he won a belt, or I don't remember what it was, but they put him, after he wins the match, they go to interview him.
Hmm.
And they put the microphone here, and he says, "Every time you put a mic in my face, I'm gonna say Arkansas." And like that's the first words that come out of his mouth. And I resonated with old Thug Nasty a little bit because all my
Yeah.
book, I mean, like the first book is about high school football, which is a big deal in
Right.
Arkansas. Second book is loosely based on a crime, a double homicide, but that happened in our right here in our community.
Hmm.
And this third book is about chicken processing, and chicken processing plants. And chicken farming is a huge deal in
Yeah.
Arkansas. Tyson, in this book, it is completely fictional, and it focuses on Detmer foods. Um, but I say all this to say that the book is focused around four main characters, two couples.
Hmm.
Um, the plant manager, who's basically the boss of the whole plant, and his wife, and then two line workers who are boyfriend and girlfriend, Gabriela Menchaca and Edwin Saucedo. And so, long story short, like with those four voices, like my first two books, it was so like Arkansas gritty, like
Hmm.
through and through, that I felt like if I didn't read it, maybe nobody else could read it.
Could get it right. Yeah.
This was a different thing with this book. This book
Okay.
set up in Northwest Arkansas, which is a world away from here. It's where
Hmm.
the Walmart money is, the Tyson money is. Um, so yeah, so there's some you'll be pleasantly surprised, I think, with who does that audiobook. I'll just
Okay.
leave it. Yeah.
Well, I still have an Audible account, so I can won't hear your voice this time, but
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah.
Um, so let's take a step back and talking about Arkansas, talking away from. Actually, it's funny when I had first. I think you had posted some pictures a while back of the lake that you live on or near, and the nuclear power plant in the back. And I think somewhere you put where it was, and I was like, but I remember a while ago, I wrote a note about making sure I bring this up because I was like, I've heard, I've heard the name, not of the lake, but I've heard the name of that town before, and I was trying to like rack my brain a while ago of like, why do I know that name in Arkansas? Because I've never been there, never been to that part of Arkansas. John Daly actually lives in Dardanelle, or did. I don't know if he still does. Who knows where John lives in his RV at a Hooters probably somewhere. But own a golf course there too.
Yeah.
So I was
Great. Yeah. Great deep dive there, Eric.
very deep dive.
So John Daly is from Dardanelle. So where I'm from, or where I went to school and grew up is Russellville. And we
Okay.
live right here on the banks of Lake Dardanelle.
Okay.
We now live in this little tiny town of about less than 1,000 that's across the lake from Russellville.
Okay.
Uh, and then Dardanelle is across the lake slash. So all Lake Dardanelle is a dammed up segment of the Arkansas River.
Hmm.
And then Dardanelle is across the Arkansas River from Russellville. So all three of us are kind of separated by this water.
Right.
John Henley does still live in Dardanelle.
Okay.
Uh, and he has the Lion's Den Golf Club is the
Okay.
name golf club. Which if you can see on my bald head right here, when I was right out of college one time, there was a Halloween party at the Lion's Den, and I had snuck behind the bar and was trying to take some, maybe a beer. I don't know. It was a bad moment in my life. But my buddy was watching, and I was dressed up as a monk because I was bald then too. My head was shaved. And I was dressed up as a monk, and he said, Eli, they're coming. And I jerked up and I hit my head on the corner of that bar.
Oh,
And it,
goodness.
and to this day, I can't really get that spot of my head to shave right, So
So this is all John Daly's fault.
he wasn't there, he wasn't there at the college party, maybe he was, but I didn't see him. But yeah, John Daly is he's just right over there. So for me, what's cool about Lake Dardanelle, Yell County,
Hmm.
is that is where, if you have read or seen the movies for True Grit,
Hmm.
that is where Maddie Ross is from. So
Okay.
that is where she starts her journey, is in Yell County. She comes down from there and follows up to Fort Smith.
Okay.
But Charles Portis, who wrote that novel and four other really great novels, is, to me, I mean, he's Arkansas's uh, highest, author, and
Yeah.
so the fact that this is kind of True Grit country. If it weren't dark, I'd show you, all these
Hmm.
pictures behind me are pictures we've taken right here.
Yeah, from right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, we just live. The water's just right out there. So
Gotcha. Yeah, it's amazing where we come from and then how a lot of times we end up, of course, using parts of that as a setting. Depending on what we write, of course, but
yeah,
and I had not really I've got a novel that I'm planning to come out next year. I haven't finalized it yet, but it's the first time I've actually taken um I don't I guess my hometown's in Connecticut where I grew up, but I've haven't lived there for most of especially my adult life. But I used to have a place up in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and actually had an office in downtown up until about 2.5 years ago. And I started working on a novel about 3 years back, and I decided I wanted to bring my main characters after one of my characters killed someone up in the Grove Park Inn in Asheville. I figured, well, they'll stop in Hendersonville for the night to, have a little food, have a little, dalliance, and have a little fun. And so I was walking downtown several times and thinking like, where would be a good spot to stick those characters. And I haven't finished the novel yet. I'll dive back into it later this fall to get it out next year. But those chapters are there already that I've already written. And I don't know, just that connection to be able to put something from what you know into a story. It's cool, but I think it's powerful,
yeah,
especially like for yourself, where there's probably a lot of preconceived notions of what it's like to be from Arkansas. Just
yeah,
like anywhere in the South, or if you go up to I grew up in Connecticut, there's certain stigmas of people in the Northeast, how they act, and then of course people out in California, everybody thinks you must be a hippie or a surfer, and
yeah,
or you're in Hollywood, and that's normally so far from the truth. So
yeah.
maybe talk for a minute about how Arkansas and where you live has really factored into what you then write.
Yeah, I can remember, like, so when I went down to school in Boca Raton, like I was the only guy like on the football team, of course, who was from Arkansas.
Hmm.
And the school was like 30,000 people. And I remember, I don't know if there was anybody else at Florida Atlantic from Arkansas. Maybe there was, but if there were, I bet, it was two or three, like, and I
Hmm.
remember people like we'd be out at the club or something, and I kind of like to play it up, like even then, like I'd wear like a belt buckle or some jeans and some boots or something. And I had long hair at the time. And anyway, I remember people would figure out I was from Arkansas and they'd literally ask, like, do y'all wear shoes in Arkansas?
Oh my goodness.
Like they would literally ask these things. And I don't know that my books have done any better to help that stigma or not. Like I have definitely leaned into that because
Yeah.
there is a very heavy there is a part of that,
Hmm.
that's a part of Arkansas. And now, especially with politics, I mean, the way that the politics stuff is spinning around and in Arkansas as well. I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me. I got asked a little while ago, right when the eclipse was happening. I got asked by we have this thing called the Arkansas Times. They wanted me to write a short story around the eclipse. And they
Okay.
just do whatever you want, Eli, do whatever you want.
Hmm.
And I had this crazy idea because I write crime stuff, that it was about this guy who there was 4 minutes of totality where
Right.
everybody was going to be looking up. And I thought um, if I'm a small time criminal, that's a great window of time to steal a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. So I depicted like this MAGA tent set up like outside of a church, which is all very, very perfect for what would have happened, at an eclipse. Those things happened.
Right.
And this guy was too cheap. He was trying to sell Trump themed like solar glasses, but he actually bought 3D glasses with the red and the blue lens glasses. So it was burning everybody's eyeballs out. And so it worked better for him, and so I say that as a guy from Arkansas, and I remember when I submitted that story, they were like, Eli, like, what are you trying to say about Arkansas? And I'm
Wouldn't.
like, I'm not trying to say anything other
Right.
than this is like I drive down the road and look in some church parking lot during the eclipse, and you're going to see not that they're burning their eyes out. That was definitely artistic license, but
Right.
so I don't know, Eric. That's a long-winded way to say that, like, I try to write like what I see,
Right.
you know. And I'm from Eastern Arkansas, is where all my family's from,
Okay.
which is a completely different culture
Hmm.
and geography than where I grew up. So Eastern Arkansas, Forest City is my town. It's right outside of Memphis. So
Okay.
a very like Delta sort of culture,
Hmm.
more of that kind of, um, I don't know, old South, where
Okay.
here I'm about 2.5 hours northwest of that, up
Hmm.
into right on the edge of the River Valley, which is right where we live, and 6 miles north of here, my parents live in Dover,
Okay.
home of Dover Pirates, not to be confused with the Denton Pirates from Don't Know Tough. There's a sign that says when you pull into that town, gateway to the Ozarks. You've now entered the Ozark region
Okay.
of Arkansas. There's a town a little bit past that named Ozark called their high school mascot is the Ozark Hillbillies.
Hmm.
Their mantra is Hillbilly Pride Runs Deep. That's HPRD. I'm not joking.
I know you're
So
not.
if I were to put that in a story, HPRD, Johnny's got it tattooed on his neck or something, which Johnny does got it tattooed on HPRD, with the big
Right.
bearded hillbilly. It would seem stereotypical.
Hmm.
And yet I just try to call it like I see it,
Yeah.
I don't know. So
I think sometimes you lean into the stereotypes.
yeah,
So, probably one of the more recent, before Clinton, Clinton kind of obviously put a pretty big spotlight or shone a light on Arkansas
yeah,
because President of the United States comes from somewhere that
yep,
plenty of people in the United States probably can't find on a map.
Yeah.
which is sad, but it obviously gives some attention to the state. And then, man, I don't know how many years ago now it's been, but then of course Netflix came out with the show, Ozark.
Yeah.
That put definitely an attention on that region. And as you said, not always in the best way. Parts of it had definitely some really cool pieces to it, but then the crime part of it and the way they made the money and what they did to everyone. I mean, yeah, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating to take the setting and do you see yourself, not even something I thought about to ask, but where do you see stuff going forward? Do you see yourself setting a book that's set in the Pacific Northwest or in Europe? You've been to Europe. You've been, played football over that way. Um,
Yeah.
switching
No,
it up at
man.
some point?
I don't think I'll ever get too far. So like what one change that I did is like Broiler, like I said, is 2 more hours northwest of where I live,
Hmm.
right on that very upper left quadrant, which all the money in Arkansas is around Fayetteville, Bentonville, those Rogers area. That's
Yep.
where all the Walmart money and the Tyson money, both of which originated in and are
Hmm.
headquartered in that little pocket of Arkansas.
Right.
So if you went up there, it would feel more like an Austin, Texas, or something like that. So there are no maniacal hillbillies in Broiler,
Hmm.
which is new. I mean, both of my first two books had definitely leaned into
Hmm.
that Ozark hillbilly pride run deep sort of deal. So
Yeah.
it doesn't have that. The white people are very well to do. The line workers are line workers.
Hmm.
And then the book that'll be out next is actually set in Mississippi.
Okay.
Uh, and it centers around big money college football, and all of the craziness that goes into that. So definitely more of like where I said where I was born and where all my
Hmm.
family still stays in that Delta kind of region between Mississippi and Arkansas and right on
Okay.
that border. So I don't want to venture too far away.
Yeah.
So the first manuscript I ever wrote, which will never see the light of day as long as I'm alive, is called American Football, and it was
Hmm.
set in Sweden. It was all just kind of a thinly veiled autobiography, of these
Okay.
crazy days in the Swedish American Football League.
Which ventures, so let's transition to that. So how does an Arkansas boy who goes to school in Florida and then ends up getting a professional football gig over in Europe? Talk about that a little bit, but how does that then transition into, hey, let's write novels?
So my first year, I played down in at Florida Atlantic, and the coach there was Howard Schnellenberger.
Yep.
So those of you that don't know, Howard Schnellenberger was a legendary, like he was the guy who really started the U, like at Miami,
Hmm.
uh, and won a national championship there in the 70s, then coached on the Dolphins. So it was a whole different kind of world.
Yeah.
Washington Baptist was a private Baptist school where I finished up and played most of my quarterbacking career.
Hmm.
And I was always an English literature major,
Okay.
um, which was strange as hell because, I was the university's starting quarterback. And like at Washington, I think my senior year, there were 6 English literature majors. It was a very small school.
Wow.
And of those 6, I was the only dude. And I also happened to be the quarterback,
The starting
like
quarterback.
yeah, yeah. So it was weird, but I met a guy there, a professor of mine, who is still a dear, dear friend and mentor
Hmm.
and reader of everything I write, a guy named Johnny Wink.
Okay.
And so I was telling you, now I've been lucky enough this past year to get to teach at a school as a kind of a part of this as a writer in residence at a university here just across the lake, Arkansas
Hmm.
Tech University. And man, I'm trying to be Johnny Wink, like because what he did for me is he taught creative writing, intro to creative writing, advanced creative writing, workshop classes. And I just took as many of them as I could because I was a football player. So I was there for, 5 years, like playing all the eligibilities out and stuff.
Right.
And Johnny is the most amazing dude. He's still teaching. He's going into his fifth. He just is wrapping up his 50th year teaching at Washita,
Wow.
and he'll turn 80 in September. The way I ended up getting to Sweden was I was nominated for what's called the Harlan Hill Award,
Okay.
which is the equivalent, the Division II equivalent of like the Heisman. And
Hmm.
so what happened was your name goes on this list, and then these European teams start sending out invitations to who's ever on that list.
Right.
And this Swedish team, it actually came in a Facebook message of all things. I thought it was like this was before spam was like as big as it is now, or I probably
Yeah.
would have opened it. But then we did like a Zoom or whatever hell it was, Skype or whatever it was called back then. And
Hmm.
and it was really, I really think it was my English major, English lit major stuff that really made them pull the trigger on me because
Interesting.
it takes a certain kind of guy, to be able to leave home for a year,
Yeah.
go to another country, not know anybody, not speak the
Mhm.
language, and be cool, And for me, that experience coupled with being down in Boca, um, for me, that was exactly what I needed to
Yeah.
get away and kind of see Arkansas
Mhm.
from a
Yep.
distance and start to be able to think about where I was from and what it meant to me. And I wouldn't live anywhere else. I mean, I've already talked about some of the things that are funny and some of the things that drive me crazy, about,
Hmm.
but I don't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, it sounds like you've got a great place to just to raise your kids, and I think especially as fathers of younger kids in this particular time in history, I I I, I don't know what to say. I mean, I almost don't know what to say. I mean, you definitely are blessed. You're blessed in life anyways, especially if you live in the United States. Not that there's bad things that don't happen and not that there's poverty. I know all that happens, but as a general rule, if you're born or make your
yeah,
way to this country, you have a leg up on a lot of people in the world and probably most people that have ever existed. Just
yeah,
the opportunities we have here are really only hindered by ourselves a lot of times. You can really accomplish a lot here. That being said, it's still there's places you can be that make it more difficult to, I think, raise a family. And so to find a spot where, because I never wanted to live in the South. Came down here for school. I couldn't wait to get out of here. Moved to Colorado. Enjoyed actually Colorado a lot, but I had problems with employment. I moved out there in 2003, two, somewhere around there, and the market had crashed. And Denver, especially, usually shed jobs at the end and picked them up fast, and it went opposite. They lost jobs and it was hard. So I bounced around from like temp job to temp job. Um, and so that was just disheartening and ended up moving to Seattle. Had an opportunity to open up there. Um, and really enjoyed being out in Seattle. But then at the time I'd gotten married when we were in Colorado, and then we're on opposite sides of the country from all of our family.
yeah,
For me, I think it was easier than my wife at the time. And for her, she had grown up with family close by, and all of a sudden have 2,000 plus miles just
yeah,
was too much of a challenge. So we came back east, settled in Richmond for a few years, and that's where my son was born. And then after he was born, it was like need to be close to family to have that connection, have just that camaraderie with family close by.
yeah,
So it was kind of go back up to Connecticut where I was from, or come back down to the South where her family ties were.
yeah,
Women normally went out on those kind of things. So we ended up in the South. And for a while, I was actually pissed I was in the South. I don't want to, I think that wanderlust within me of wanting to always be doing something was just being stifled for a while. And it,
yeah,
it took maturity. It took things happening in life to realize, hey, I'm actually in a blessed spot. I've got a great group of friends, and I live an hour from a major international airport. Guess what? If I want to go somewhere, the only thing preventing me from doing it is resources.
Yeah.
So I've kind of settled in now. I don't know that I'll be here, indefinite, but especially with my kids still being school age, yeah, this is where they'll be. This is where I'll be. And so I've embraced it, and I get out a lot. I go hiking a lot on the weekends, especially when one of my kids. I'm definitely out and about. I write on mountaintops now. So, I try to embrace where I am and then, be grateful for it, basically.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt, man. There's no substitute for family. We've got four grandparents all within about a 6 mile radius. So
Wow.
it definitely helps with the kiddos and everything like that.
Yeah.
So and the writing, not gonna lie. Like having that much help,
Yep.
helps everything. So
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the writing, I know you've written a lot more than what's come out. What you've written though so far, do you see yourself staying in crime, or do you see yourself maybe branching out? I know it's not years ago. If you were a crime writer or whatever, you'd almost be pigeonholed and write in that genre. But I think in the last several years, especially, you're starting to see authors really kind of branch out and sometimes have a crime novel and then also a fantasy or whatever. You're seeing people kind of
yeah,
diversify themselves. Where's Eli going?
man. So I didn't know anything about crime writing really until Don't Know Tough one that I got into the publishing industry by first novel contest that was
Hmm.
hosted by publisher, Soho Press, Soho Crime. And up until that point, like I said, I was an English literature major. So I mean, like Johnny Wink had me memorizing Shakespearean sonnets. And I was reading a lot of Southern literature. So, I mean, starting at maybe, Faulkner, but then going all the way up through Toni Morrison. Beloved is a favorite of mine. Um, Flannery O'Connor, um, Harry Crews, Larry Brown, all of that kind of world was what I was doing. And I think some of those novels, especially some of Larry Brown's stuff, which if y'all don't know Larry Brown, he was a Mississippi writer that was a fireman, not college educated, that just sat down and decided he wanted to try and be a writer and just wrote these real kind of cut down to the bone, hard scrabble stories that he lived a lot of.
Hmm.
And so early on, I was trying to write just that sort of stuff. But like I said, a lot of those things, even Faulkner, I mean, like I think Light in August, I think he even described that as a crime novel.
Hmm.
So I read what the description was, and this was after I'd had over 200 rejections on Don't Know Tough, and Don't Know Tough was the fourth manuscript I'd written and queried. Um, I found that contest, luckily, thanks to a good buddy, William Boyle,
Hmm.
who is now with Soho, which is
Yeah.
so it's beautiful. He wasn't at the time. He just put me on this. And I read their little descriptor of what it constituted a crime novel. And it was just the fact that a crime had to happen, somewhere.
Hmm.
And I don't know, man, something about that. So I got my book won that contest, and that was my break and my end to the business. And everything I've written, I mean, Ozark, I guess Don't Know Tough was classified as a mystery because there is a dead body and you don't know who did it. But
Right.
Ozark Dogs fell under the thriller world. Broiler falls under the thriller world. And this book that'll be out in 2025 is called Mississippi Blue 42. And it is if you have you ever read any Carl Hyacin
I have
or
not
familiar
now.
with Hyacin? So he's most known for that movie, that Demi Moore movie with Striptease with Burt Reynolds with the old, it's
Hmm.
just like screwball. Like, and my favorite author is Elmore Leonard by far. I've read all
Right.
42 Elmore Leonard novels. And there's just something about what they do both of those guys, which is the plots go everywhere and
Hmm.
it's bigger than life and it's crazier. And so your question was, where am I going? And so I'm not going anywhere outside of the crime world, but maybe I feel like I'm kind of leaving, the dirty, gritty,
Hmm.
like that stuff. And I think a lot of that comes because Don't Know Tough, Ozark Dogs, and Broiler were all written, except for Broiler. Broiler was written right when our kid was about 6 months old, but the other two were before kids.
Okay.
And so I was writing this really dark, kind of, angsty stuff,
Hmm.
which has been great. And I'm so glad that it's found a stuff, but life's pretty good now,
Yeah.
so it's the stuff I'm doing now, there's still tinges of, dark stuff.
Sure.
Um, but it definitely kind of has more of a Carl Hyacin, Elmore Leonard, maybe even Flannery O'Connor in the way that Flannery O'Connor was able, to take kind of like I was explaining that short story about the eclipse,
Mm.
take something like that and twist it in just the right kind of way. So that's what I don't see myself going out of crime um anytime soon, but maybe just a different vein of the crime, maybe a little lighter, funnier sort of stuff, if anybody can believe that, then I would write the funny stuff.
A little more humor versus some dark stuff happening in the woods and
Yeah,
getting
although I
shot
would
at
say
and all the other good stuff.
one of the funniest scenes I think I've ever written is when in Don't Know Tough, when Billy's brother Jesse, he gets real drunk one night and puts a beer box on his head toward like the third act of that book.
Hmm.
And bad motherfucker across the front of it misspells the word. And he's looking through, the handle on the beer box as he's
Yep.
having real serious conversation with the main character, Billy. And
Right.
I mean, it's a horrible scene. It's a very dark scene, but I always think that beer box is pretty funny.
It's funny. Well, the things that sometimes we catch that we put in that we might find funny that maybe the reader doesn't, but at the end of the day, you got to write what you enjoy. Um, and they're so I don't know. You have a book and you get to express what you want to say, but you get to put little anecdotes. Like to me, that's what means so much. I mean, there's so many things, in what will be my third book that's coming out. There's so many things in there that most people will never know. They'll never
Yeah,
know that this character is based on this person or that name is a real person. Is it who
yeah,
they really are? No, of course not. But I have someone coming up that in a character, and I was telling the person that yeah, you're in there and all that, and I read them a couple of the paragraphs because they're very thrifty person,
yeah.
and they're like, "Did you call me cheap?" And I was like, "No, no, no, I used the word thrifty," and it's like, and they loved it. They were very pleased with it. But yeah, just that I don't know. To me, getting to put real stuff in a completely fictional story, it just like I was saying before we came on here. I'm in the final. My latest book has got copy edits are done. I'm just going through it one more time to see anything look out of place,
Yeah.
anything I want to tweak. But even, an hour ago, I was reading something and it was just one little thing there that no one will ever pick up on, but it made me smile because it's in there for me.
Yeah.
So those kind of things that's the juice to me. That's the juice of doing it. Um, so we've kind of tackled where you started, where you're going, but let's dive into Broiler. So, again, like you've already alluded to, um, it's kind of in a way a change of scene for you, a change of pace because you're setting it somewhere different in a different part of the state where you've done before. But where did that idea come from, especially dealing with, a chicken plant and these kind of crazy things that happened in the course of the story? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so the seed of the idea came. I was teaching in what was an ALE school, so alternative ed school.
Hmm.
And it was like an offshoot of our big high school. And if you ask those kids like why they were there, they would tell you that was where the bad kids went. But that wasn't true.
Hmm.
There was about 50 of them, and I think our high school has close to 1,000 students in it. So it's a larger high school. Um, and this is just a subpopulation of like 50 students. And why they're there is for all sorts of reasons. Some of it's behavioral, but for whatever reason, they're not succeeding in the big class, the
Okay.
big population. Some of it would be, if a student got pregnant and she had to miss, a whole bunch of class, then she might come there and do
Right.
makeup. But my first week there, I had a class, I had a table of like Mexican American students who they would start off at 8 o'clock, and we had these big block classes. So they would be there till about lunch, and they would sleep from the moment that they came in and put their heads down. And I couldn't wake them up. Like they were so dead to the world that I could not wake them up. And like if I'd go, and I was new
Mm-hmm.
and a former football coach, and I was shaking their desk and saying, get up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally go to my principal after a couple of days of this. And I said, I can't get these students to wake up. What's going on? And he said, well, man, they're working the 10-hour night shift at a nearby chicken plant. And he
Wow.
said, you need to just let them sleep and we'll eat. And so
Hmm.
I did let them sleep. And eventually they did wake up. And when they did, the writer in me, and this was before, again, before Don't Know Tough had ever come out. So I wasn't thinking of an audience or a public. I was just curious, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is the number one thing a writer needs to be. So I started asking them, tell me about these 10-hour shifts.
Yeah.
So they told me about these metal mesh gloves, basically like chainmail, that they would wear on their hand. And one of them is his whole job was to cut the left hind leg off these broiler chickens for like 10 hours. They told me it was down in like the 40s in the plant because that didn't allow like bacteria growth. And they'd spray this kind of misty fog that was like an antibacterial spray. And just how, they would get off these shifts and they'd get off at like 6:30 in the morning, just really depending on how big of a load of broilers that's the
Mm-hmm.
chicken, how big of a load that would come in.
Yeah.
And they'd barely have time to go home, get a shower, and then be ready at school, by 7:30. So
Unbelievable.
couple that with, we did have like a 6-month-old at the house. And this is again weird the way a writer's brain works. Um, and we're new parents, and I'm feeling all this stress,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote stress of new parenthood, new fatherhood. And there was something about those two things,
Mm.
something about, and that is really where the story centers. It half of the book is about a couple who has a child that's about 6 months old, the plant manager and his wife, and then the other is these two line workers they're in their 20s. And I don't know, man, it's a weird place to draw inspiration from for a book, but that was where it all started for me.
Yeah. Well, again, you write kind of that the creative side of you takes over and you're able to take completely diametrically opposed situations and
Yeah.
figure a way to make a story out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I
which,
think maybe the coolest thing that's happened so far with that book is we were able to send it off to Daniel Woodrell, the guy, the Winter's Bone, author, and he's from Southern Missouri,
okay.
um, and a big hero of mine.
Hmm.
Uh, and he read it and was his blurb is actually on the cover. I got author copies in, but I don't have them here. They're over there somewhere. But his
That's okay.
blurb is on the cover, and he called it Steinbeckian, for not for the plot or for, but he alluded to Steinbeck for those four characters, those four that I've said. And man, that's to me just kind of, again, it is a crime novel. It would be classified as a thriller or something, but it's a little more understated than my other books. I
Yeah.
think in places, it's a little more, I don't know if serious is the right word, but but a little more of a drama, than a guns out
Yeah.
sort of.
Well, I wonder if that also has to do with the fact of you just maturing as an author and how
Oh,
you're, especially as like you were saying, Don't Know Tough hadn't come out yet. You, in a lot of ways, even though your family situation hasn't radically changed, you've
yeah,
radically changed.
yeah,
You went from someone, working at a school, teaching, to all of a sudden you're a published author, you're winning awards. People are asking you to come to, I remember, I think last year we were talking around this time, I think I texted you or whatever. You and your wife went to New York City for the first time together.
yeah, yeah. We'll be back again here in a couple of months we've got a couple of stops up there for the book
For the
tour
book
and
tour,
for
okay. So
yeah,
those different things that sometimes come along with the writing that then, they really they expand your canvas of what
yeah,
of where you then
absolutely.
get ideas from,
Yeah, absolutely.
which I think is pretty I don't know, it's pretty powerful. I mean, I think that's part of why I've got that lust to travel is because
Yeah,
I kind of rationalize the writer side of my brain rationalizes says the more I'll see, the more ideas I'll have for future novels.
yeah,
Um, because and I think you're very similar in the sense of I don't know, I didn't write one novel and then be like, I'm
yeah,
done, I'm good, or I could never go through that again. I can't imagine my life ever getting to a point where I don't have a story to tell. And I can at least at this point in my life say I don't want to get to a point where I don't have another story left to tell. Because I think the beauty of what we do is there's not an age limit.
yeah,
And I've talked about that with other people. You started, obviously on a path of football. Well, that's a career that if you're able to make a living out of doing it, you actually can get really high, really young, and then you're going to fizzle out at a very early age. And you might turn that into coaching or commentator or whatever. You might be, somehow tied into the sporting world. But there's a very finite period of time you can do that versus with writers. A lot of the instances of people we know in the world we live in, success a lot of times does not come when you're young.
yeah, yeah,
Success comes when you're older. You've got experience. I think, like for you especially, I think getting the family, having the kids, it's kind of like I know some people that have gone back to college. I know people that went to college before they got married. Um, and were successful. It wasn't a knock at that or anything, but I know some people that went back to school after they got married and had kids.
yeah.
And they were, you would think, oh man, you got a full-time job, you got kids, you got a wife, you got
These are focused.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're laser focused and they thrive in it and they do really well because they know, hey, I've got 2 hours a night. I've got to get X, Y, and Z done. I can't let any other distraction take place with that. Versus, when you're 20 years old or 21, hopefully, hey, there's a party down the hall. Man,
yeah,
screw school. I'm gonna
yeah,
go live it up. So again, I think with age comes wisdom, and then from a writing perspective with experience and age comes the opportunity to tell more stories.
yeah, absolutely.
And then you get to, and I've talked about this with some other folks too, the amazing thing about what we do is we get to leave something behind.
Mhm.
Hopefully it's a whole shelf of our books, but even if it's not, and for you, for myself, it won't just be one because we've already gotten past that point. Um, but no matter what, we've been able to craft something that our kids and our grandkids hopefully will be able to somehow be like, oh, Grandpa Eli. Oh my goodness. Did you
Yeah.
read the one about the chicken factory? They're like, "Oh, what was going on there?"
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
before we wrap up, talk about what it's meant to you. You've alluded to it, but um, in the education world, again, someone that started from the football side, getting into writing, but really, you've had years then of being an educator and also mentoring, I'm sure to an extent, players as being a coach for 5 years. But what's that meant to you and how has that been of kind of that groundwork you've been able to lay for other young people?
Yeah, it's really taken shape this past year at this new gig of being a writer in residence. Coaching was a completely different thing in terms of, I mean, I was a head football coach at a really young age of like 26. So you're definitely like playing this mentor role and a father figure to a lot of these guys who don't have good father figures. So
Hmm.
that was this whole own thing. Then I went back into just like a high school classroom, which definitely still had, its own stuff. But I've really kind of come into my stride, I feel like, in this college setting, because my passion was always writing.
Hmm.
Even when I was teaching, it was writing. And
Right.
I was teaching 10th, 11th, 12th grade English. And I enjoyed doing that. But this past year, I have just had the most fun, like I said, kind of getting to do my best Johnny Wink, my mentor, do my best Johnny Wink impersonation. Um, and make them, and I think it's a huge task in this day and age, even with students who elect to take writing classes, which is a beautiful thing. I have only students who wanted to take creative writing, for
Hmm.
whatever reason. But even them, their reading habits are not as great as maybe what I was expecting, because they are very distracted, and distracted in ways that you and I weren't. We
Right.
weren't capable of being distracted in those ways. Um, so I mean, the things that they haven't read was shocking at first,
Hmm.
but then it was also kind of really awesome because I could introduce them, to
Yeah.
those. And so it has been this past year at the college level, um, and just kind of taking that as it's really felt like for the first time, everything I'm doing is working together
Hmm.
for it, for the teaching, for the books publicity, to the university's publicity. And yeah, today was my last day. It was the fiction workshop was the final I gave.
Hmm.
And my final literally consisted of this. It was one blank sheet of printer paper, and it said fiction workshop final. And then the instructions just said, thrill me,
I
thrill me.
love it.
And so it blew their minds. But I was like, you have, the hour and 30 minutes or however long we have allotted in this final time. And I just want you to write something that thrills me. Like it could
Mm.
be as short as 6 words. It could be as long as much as you can print on the front and back of this. It
Yeah.
can be a personal essay. It can be a short story set on Mars,
Mm.
but think of something, write me something using all this stuff that we've talked about this semester. And man, the responses I got were, I don't know if it was because they were just locked in, and no phones were allowed or whatever, but um, it was really cool. Really
Yeah.
impressive.
That's you can see how much you brightened up just saying that. And I mean,
Yeah,
that's life's short. Man, if
yeah,
you're not and I know sometimes you have to do things to get to the next thing, but man, if you can find something that you're passionate about, if you can find something that brings you joy in this life, man, pursue it.
yeah,
I know I've talked to other people before. They're like, you know, wanting to be a writer, they obviously don't know the business if they're thinking this, but I'll get into writing, but I don't really, have a strong desire. I'm good at it. It's something that, and there are people that are good at writing that maybe don't love telling a story or don't do that. And this is the worst career. If you don't love coming up
yeah,
with stories, then please go do something else. There's probably always an exception to the rule. If someone can be really good at it, can just be successful, but I don't think you're going to be happy. I mean, because this is something that the joy, and granted, we cut ourselves probably a million little times too with what we do,
yeah,
but the joy of finishing a product, turning that novel in, and then getting to promote it, and then you're on to the next one. I look forward to. I got about 40 something days until my third comes out. Or my last one was a novella, but my third published work will come out. Um, I'm going to be excited. I'm going to hold that book. I'm going to hold it in my hand, but I know it's going to be short lived because my brain's going to say, okay, I got to do the next one. The next one's already It's already almost done.
Yeah.
But I've got to flip to that one. I got to get that one fixed. I got to get that for the next one. It's that I don't know. For me, I don't know about, can't speak for you, but for me, I'm kind of always searching for that lightning in a bottle. That feeling I had with holding my first novel.
Yeah.
I know I'll never have it again in the same way,
Yeah.
but that's okay. I know I can still feel an immense amount of joy in the accomplishment of holding that. So.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Well, hey, that leads me to our final question, which is kind of a deep one. But I know you're up for it. So especially you're in such a great spot in life right now, which I'm so happy to see. Um, I think you'd agree with me that though, for when it comes to life, is really very similar to a book. You'll have a first page, you'll have a last page. None of us know how many pages we have to fill. But Eli, you're a pretty prolific writer. You've written a bunch of stuff and you're going to write a lot more stuff. You get to write that last page. What would you want to put down on that last page and be remembered by?
Oh man. Well, I recently read The Tao of Pooh. Have you ever heard of this?
I'm not.
It was written back, I don't know, probably in the 60s or the 70s. And it's talking about Taoism,
Okay.
uh, and it's comparing Winnie the Pooh, as in Pooh Bear,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to being kind of this perfect Taoist. And
Hmm.
my nature is not and my nature is very far from a good Taoist, which is, to think if you thought about like Pooh, um, Pooh is very much just kind of lets things happen, like lets
Hmm.
the natural order happen and never forces and never pushes.
Yeah.
And still, because he's so in line with the way that things are meant to be, good things do happen. And the
Hmm.
people around him are brought up. And so I don't know, man. I would like the last page if I could find that lane and stay in it. Um, to read something very poo-like, that I was able to swallow all of the type A bits of my personality, because what we're doing here is art, and
Hmm.
that's where I am, is there is a commerce side of all this, and that's fine and dandy. And there's parts of it that I enjoy. But why I really got into this was because of Johnny Wink
Hmm.
back in that creative writing class, and just how zany and fun that guy made words and
Hmm.
literature and thoughts. And Johnny Wink is very much a Pooh Bear. He's a good Taoist. And so yeah, I would like to keep bending myself
Hmm.
that to that way. And I think everything else will kind of flow, it'll kind of follow that way. So
There's no wrong answer. I like yours.
you weren't expecting the Dow of Pooh, I don't think.
You you never know what you're gonna get. I think the second or third person I asked, they said they want to be sitting on a porch watching their grandkids and they just keel over and drop dead.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
last page. And
Yeah.
again, there's no wrong answer to that. I was in kids had a school thing this past Saturday, and at the end of it, they had kind of like a get together, and everyone's there. And I don't know a lot of the parents, so I talked to a few people, but then I just went and did my own thing. I just went out. The kids are with they don't want dad standing around. So I
Yeah.
just went out, and the back side of this property was a graveyard. And so I just was walking through the graveyard, took a few pictures, found a couple of my title characters, same
Yeah.
names, which not where I got the names from or anything. But it just, every now and then you get that reminder of we have a finite amount of time on this planet.
Yeah.
And what you do with it, yes, something can happen that takes that away from you. But as a general rule, how you choose to spend your time is your choice. It's
Yeah.
your actions, it's your desires, it's what you devote your resources to. And so those reminders help me sometimes to even just be around a graveyard. There's a place I walk here near my house a couple times a week or a couple nights a week. I walk in the evenings, and you do go by a graveyard. And I've not ventured into it yet. I look at it all the time, and one of these days I'll venture into it and just kind of have one of those deep moments again. But it's always on the periphery as I'm walking. And it just always, again, gives me that subtle little reminder of, are you working on things that you value? because it's
Yeah.
so easy to get caught up. And the time with family is invaluable.
Yeah.
But I have time, in my situation, I have time. I have half a month that I don't have my kids around. So I get
Yeah.
to just choose what I do with when my free time kicks in. I like those reminders sometimes to be like, should you really be doing that with the time? Is that going to help you get three more novels out in the next 18 months, like you're planning, all those things. So, it's always, I don't know, but at the end of the day, I try to look at it as being grateful too.
Yeah.
Grateful that I have the opportunities to do what I do. I get the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I get to have these amazing experiences, and I'm grateful for those. And that's ultimately that's my heartfelt desire,
Yeah.
is to have more of those experiences. So, well, hey,
Amen.
go ahead. Sorry.
I just said amen. Yeah.
Okay. Broilers out tomorrow, July 2nd. So send people where they need to go to get not just broiler, but get Ozark dogs. Don't know tough. Where should they
Yeah.
go, Eli?
And anywhere you get books. So yeah, anywhere you get books, you can get any of my novels. And dude, I really appreciate you having me on, Eric. This is great
Yeah.
talk.
Love catching up with you. One of these days we'll have an adult beverage again. So
Sounds good.
take care.